Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have part 2 of our 2-part series talking all about the difference between joint ventures and mergers and acquisitions in growing a business. And in order to talk about this, we have on board the fabulous Ed Chan from Chan and Naylor, who has also now co-founded the accounting consultancy Wise Mentoring for accountants, but also potentially relevant to businesses outside of accounting practices. Now, if you haven't heard part 1, I strongly recommend you go back and have a listen to that, because that really paves the way for the discussion today in part 2, which is a follow-on in looking at the difference between mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. So in this 2-part series, we're really diving deep into the opportunity in joint ventures, which is a slightly different proposition to the usual course of events that we think about in terms of mergers and acquisitions. And so in this discussion, we're really digging deep into the model that Chan and Naylor had used over the past many decades to grow their accounting practice. And we're taking some of those elements and looking deeply at how you can apply them in your business. So we look at the difference between mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures. We looked at why corporate models are better than partnership models, and we dug into what that actually even means. We looked at some of the tips and tricks if you are looking at undergoing joint venture relationships. So being clear about who's responsible, looking at the different variations of joint ventures, and how you can set yourself up for success. Today we're looking a lot further at how to avoid problems in consolidation, how to make sure you're bringing value to the relationship, and how a joint venture model is different to a franchise model. Ultimately, we're looking at how you can use these strategies to create a business that can work without you. So as I said, if you haven't heard part 1, I highly recommend you start off by going back and listening to that. That was the last episode to release just before this episode. But if you have, then sit back, relax, and let's get stuck into part 2 of our discussion with Ed Chan, all about joint ventures. And so now, taking you into what you do today, and I love that. What a great idea, spending 12 months together. And actually, there's an element of this that sounds a little bit similar to something that I think you had talked about in a previous episode where we were talking about acquisitions, where you'd said that you keep everything the same for a year. So I recall you saying that. So this 12-month period of time is obviously, something that you have in your mind is that period of time that's important to have enough time with a business to know how the business is running before you make changes, or in this instance, to get to know someone enough before you enter into a business relationship together.
Yes.
And I guess because the pain of tearing these things apart when they don't work out, it can take your eye off the ball. It can take time, money, and attention, can't it? So I guess you're saying, well, here's the ways to avoid that element of pain.
Yeah. It's a lot of damage to both firms. There's a damage to the firm that's coming in, and there's also damage to our firm. Now, look, I'm interested in a long-term relationship, and it's got to be a win for both parties. And if it's not going to be a win, then it's best not to do it. And I'm not an opportunist or anything like that. I'm not trying to take advantage of anybody. It's got to be a fair income and a legitimate value for both parties, and if it's got to be a long term, and I'm in it for the long term, and if it is a long term, scenario that I'm interested in, I'm certainly the one that's interested in the long term relationship. Then I wouldn't like to go into something for the short term and have to unravel it later on. It's better to go slow, and a year of engagement before you get married, I suppose.
That's a good way to refer to it. I like it. Makes sense. Okay. And so, and one more question just along that line in terms of how you're doing things today. Do you adopt the philosophy of these days buying into practices as well, or is it still that concept of the value that you're bringing is a bit like the sweat equity side of things? You know, is it a phase that you started with and then moved away from, or is it something that's a good long-term strategy, I guess, is what's underlying my question?
That's a really good question, Joanna, because if you look back at the history, there's a huge amount of damage when the consolidators came through. And they started consolidating, and I won't mention all the names because there's a lot of failures, and they all failed. And Kroll Horwath is the only one that's left, and I'm not sure that they're going that well, but I think they all face the same problem. When you buy a firm, at the end of the day, the relationship is between the practitioner and the client. And that's quite unique in the sense that clients are not just coming to a shop to buy a product. And they're buying that relationship with that practitioner, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant.
Yeah, a dentist.
Yes, and in particular with an accountant, it's all to do with your finances, and it's quite private and so forth. So the accountants in particular have a very personal relationship with the client, because you get to know all their personal affairs, and they're sharing all that with you, and they rely on you quite a lot. And so it is a relationship, and for an investor to try and invest in that relationship, it's quite risky. And if don't listen to me, but just look at history and look at what's actually happened. And there's many of them have failed, and many of them have lost money, and it's just not worked. And so often people say to me, Chan and Naylor's still around and you're still going well, and what's the difference? And I think the main difference for us is that we don't interfere in the way they run the business, and we bring particular value to the relationship, whereas a lot of consolidators they weren't bringing any value to the office. It was the value was for them on their IPO when they
and that's what it was all about, right? That's what drives a lot of the aggregation models, I guess, as a whole, right? Because that's right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so what would you say your top tips are on and I guess we can hear perhaps your feeling about the difference between mergers and joint ventures, given you ended up really going for the JV model. So I guess I'm guessing here.
In particular, I guess I better just explain the difference perhaps between our JV model and perhaps a franchise model.
Yeah.
Because it looks very similar. With a franchisor and a franchisee, the franchisor earns his or her income from the royalties that the franchisee pays to the franchisor. And the franchisor has no interest in the business of the franchisee other than the royalties that they get. So they don't have a sharing in the profits of the business, of the franchisee's business. So therefore the franchisor, because he or she makes their money from the royalties that's calculated on the turnover, the more franchisees they put on, the more money they make. And often you get franchisees that don't make any profits and they just exist. And the franchisor continues on putting on more and more and more franchisees because their purpose is not aligned. With us, we don't earn our money from royalties or anything like that. Our revenue or our earnings come from the profits of the offices. So we take a equity interest in them. And then, therefore, we share in the profits based on our percentages. So I've aligned the interests of our offices to my interests, which is the bottom line. So if they're profitable, then I'm profitable. If they're not profitable, then I'm not profitable. So, we're both working towards ensuring that our joint venture partners are profitable, whereas that's different from the franchisor model. So that's why, we don't have hundreds and hundreds of Chan Naylor offices around, because there's no point in having a lot of offices. I'd rather deal with one office that's 10 times the size of 10 small ones, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you maybe give just a short comment on how this has allowed you to, I guess, live or have a different lifestyle to many business owners? Because I talk to many people who have grown really big businesses, but they quite often then are trapped by the business itself, in that perhaps doing very well because of the business and have a lot of value in the equity in the business, but are still chained to the roles and just end up with bigger and bigger responsibilities on a daily basis. But you have always seemed to me to have had a bit of a different approach. And when I say this, I say that the first time, I recall we met at one point when both of our officers were speaking at a seminar, and we met at the seminar, and I said, oh gosh, I contacted you afterwards and said, look, I'd love to have a quick 10-minute coffee. So I came out and we had a 4.5-hour lunch, I think, while you downloaded but that's in my, in my world, it is very hard to find people where even if they planned a 4-hour lunch well in advance, they could. But this was just a random, occurrence, and we got talking, and 4 hours later we were still talking about business. Now, that's generally not the mark of someone that has a large business behind them. Do you know what I mean? So I just want to dig into this a little bit, because I think this is really special, and I think it's a really important distinction and important approach that I found really useful to hear from you. So I'd just love if you could share a little bit of that.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a problem with small business as well as large business, and because often you could be a one-man band and being very small, but you're a prisoner to your business.
Yeah,
you change your business, and then you could be very large and still be chained to your business.
Yeah.
And I guess the fundamental difference, I guess, is for me, I've always wanted the business to work without me, not because of me. And in order to have it work without me, then you have to have things set up in such a way that it's not dependent on me, but it had to get done if I wasn't here. So I every step of the way, every step of the journey of building this business, I've always said, how do we get that done when I'm not here? And, if you have that mindset, then you always make sure that, you've hired the right people, you've got the right systems in place, you've trained them the right way. And in the event that they leave, you've got plan B. So I've always thought that way. And because of that, I guess that, I've been able to build this business that works without me and not because of me. I think it starts with the way that you think about your business, and then whether that's small or large, because, if you don't think like that, then you can't scale it, you can't leverage it, you can't grow it. That's the first thing. And then, of course, if you do think that way and then you do grow it, then it's just a natural extension moving forward. So I've been able to create, 4 businesses now that all works without me. And it all just generates a passive income. And it's only because, I thought that way from the very beginning. And that's the only reason.
And sure, but it's not, I mean, many of us have read The E-Myth, and that was a cornerstone book for me when I read it. It was one of those books where I just went, wow, yeah, I get it. That's amazing. But you've so lived it and so applied it. And I guess, I think that's part of that's the sparkle as well. It's not just the concept. It must have been execution every day, constant application, implementation, of all of these concepts that got you to that position. Is that right?
Absolutely. You've got to implement. And, accounting firms often say to me, I've been following your career, or they were talking about Chan Naylor, I think, and, we're about the same size. And, 20 years later, you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing. And you're 30 times the size that I am. And I think the only difference was you implemented and I didn't.
But the key is it's not just about the size. I guess that's what we're saying here, Ed, as well, because you got the size, but without getting the ball and chain that quite often comes with the size.
Yeah, that's right. But I think it's to be honest, it's easier to be less ball and chain when you get bigger.
Yeah.
When you're smaller and you don't reach that critical mass, it's more of a ball and chain situation. But as you get bigger, as I said, in an accounting firm, you've got to get to 700,000-800,000, and it gets easier. And then when you get to 1 million, it gets easier still. But then it flips the other way, where then it gets really hard, because if you don't change how you're doing things, then most accountancy firms hemorrhage at about 1 million to 1.2 million per partner. So they hemorrhage at that. In fact, most firms, 98% of firms are at about $1 million per partner. So if it's a $2 million practice, it's 2 partners. If it's a $4 million practice, it's 4 partners. And if there's a $10 million practice, there's 9 or 10 partners. And unless you change what you do and you change it to the way that we do it, and which is all sort of captured in WISE mentoring. So then we can, if you use the WISE mentoring way, which is everything that Chan Naylor has done has been captured in WISE mentoring, then you can go to about 5 million per partner. That shows you the strength of the system, because it's a system that's carrying the business and not the individual that's carrying the business. And often when you get to 1 million per partner, if you pull that partner out of there, the whole thing will collapse. Whereas for us, not only can we go beyond 1 million per partner, we can get to 5 million per partner. But if I pull that partner out of there, the business won't collapse. It will continue to run, because it's on the strength of the system, not on the back of an individual. Systems carry the business.
Which is such an important distinction, because as I say, we see many businesses that are 10, 20, $30 million making thin profit margins and running, as fast as they possibly can, but with, lots of problems on their back. So I guess here's another way of envisioning it and putting it together. So one, I had a question as you were talking that popped into my head. I wondered, where did you get the idea for this approach to growth? Because I think this JV model that you're talking about is actually a bit unique. I haven't seen this model in many other places, and lots of people adopt lots of different models of this growth through, acquisition, merger, whatever, joint venture. But your model is really is a little bit different to the average bear I've seen. So where did you get the idea?
Well, I guess fundamentally it's based on what I said earlier, that at the end of the day, the relationship is between the practitioner and the client. And I think that's where most of the past consolidators have miscalculated. They thought it was a business they could buy. They didn't realize that it was a relationship between the practitioner and the client. And often in those consolidation models, when the practitioner sold out, they went down and set up a new office down the road, and all the clients went with them, and the consolidators lost out big time, because they didn't understand that there is this really unique, special relationship. And I guess because I'm a practitioner, I grew my practice from home, and I understood that. So that was the basis of the JVP model, is to ensure that the practitioner who had that relationship still remained in the relationship. And so, today we have a 25 to 30% ownership, equity ownership in the joint ventures. And we make sure that we add value to the joint venture, not be a consolidator of the joint venture, unlike old days where they brought no value to the office. We bring the value that we bring is the marketing that we do. So we generate over 3,000 new clients a year for our offices, and to make sure that there is a win-win for both parties. And whenever there's the win is not both ways, then you're going to have a falling out. So unlike the consolidators of the old, where they just took and not gave. Our model is to give back in the form of marketing and the things that they weren't good at. So an accountant's very good at the tax work, of course, the accounting work, and they've got a very unique relationship with the client. So that's what they contribute. And then what they can't do very well is the marketing and all that stuff. So we do the marketing and we bring the leads to them. So instead of the model, like the traditional model is, you invite a finder in. A finder is in finder, minder, and grinder. Invite a finder.
And this, as an aside, this is Ed's sort of 3-quadrant model for an accounting practice. But the finder being someone who goes and is the BD in perhaps other industry speak, the one that goes and finds the work.
Yes, the
sales.
Yes, the sales. He generates leads, and he's a finder. And generally the traditional model in the accountancy firm, the way they grow is that they invite partners in who are finders. Now, if you're a minder, they won't invite you in, and if you're a grinder, they won't invite you in.
Yeah.
So their growth model is adding new partners who are finders. And I call that model catching butterflies with a butterfly net. And the problem with that model, of course, is that, when you take that butterfly catcher out of there, that's the end of your growth. And it just doesn't work long term. So it's much better to create a garden that attracts butterflies to you. And the problem with creating that garden, as you know, Joanna, it costs a lot of money.
It does. Takes time, effort.
Long runway, and it needs particular expertise like yours. And most accountancy firms don't have that. But if you bring in complementary skills, working together, you get the synergy where 1 + 1 becomes 5. So I bring in the finding aspect of it, the garden that attracts butterflies. And, they bring in their side of it, which is the relationship with the clients, the meetings they have, the strategy, the tax, all that. They bring that into the relationship, and I bring in the marketing, the brand. The brand's very strong in the marketplace, and so therefore we bring complementary skills to the table. So it works when you bring complementary skills.
And so, implicit in that, I guess, is the point that you identified what it was that you had a value that perhaps was a little bit different in the industry and harder for other people in the industry to access themselves if they weren't naturally the finders. So I guess extrapolating that across other industries outside of accounting practices, that it is about perhaps finding your strength and finding where's the pool of people who have this value that's being limited by the fact that they don't have this strength, and then using that together to create something, synergistic. I guess.
Well, if you're a finder and you're entrepreneurial, you'd be growing the firm yourself, and you wouldn't have a need to join Chan Naylor, because that the aspect of the business that's important, which is the ability to grow the business, you've got. You bring that to the table, and therefore you won't need someone like us. So the entrepreneurial sort of accountants will never join the Chan Naylor. The intrapreneurial accountants will join Chan Naylor because the intrapreneurial accountants are sufficiently entrepreneurial to want to work for themselves, but they also need to work in a team.
Mm.
They know their limitation. They can't do everything, and they know what they're good at and what they're bad at, and they can see the value that we bring to them, and they understand that the synergy of complementary skills.
Mm.
And how we can grow the business.
And I guess interesting, it's just occurring to me that you've you've got this model to partner and to JV with the intrapreneurial, but then you also have a model to work with the entrepreneurial who need a bit more of the intrapreneurial through WISE mentoring, I guess. Is that right?
Absolutely, because often the entrepreneurial accountant knows, they can attract new clients and so forth, but they don't know how to run the business.
Mm.
And often they get a lot of churn from the clients. And so, I put WISE together with all the tools and the systems and the processes to run the back office. And that's where most entrepreneurial accountants have trouble is in the back office. So by joining up with WISE, they get access to all of that, which is, how we grew Chan Naylor to the size it is.
Mm.
And you can't do that unless you have your back office working well, and all the systems and the foundation, if you like. If you have a solid foundation underneath it all, you can put a second and a third story onto it. But if you don't have a foundation, you can't even put you can't even have a first story onto it, because it'll collapse. And often entrepreneurial firms who are really good at bringing new work in have trouble in that foundational piece.
Mm. I love it, Ed. You are a very, very clever man. You've got the entrepreneurs covered. You've got the entrepreneurs covered. I mean, what's left? It's all done. And that leads me to my very last question. What is the end game for a man who feels like he must be living his dream business at the moment? What's the end game for you, Ed Chan?
Oh, well, I've never wanted to be an empire builder. I've never thought of wanted that. I've always ever wanted just to be financially independent, and I achieved that a long time ago. And it's just everything I do now is to give back and to help. And
I really sense that in you, Ed. I do, absolutely. I sense that in you. Yeah.
And with WISE mentoring, it's when I started. When Chan and I was going very well, and I had time on my hands, and firms would ask me to help them, and I started helping them and coaching them, and that's how Jamie Johns came along, and then Jamie said, "Wow, this is really good, and you should get this out to other accounting firms." And I was giving back by coaching one-on-one, but I realised that you can't reach too many people by one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, you don't have the leverage. Yeah. So you fixed it.
I did that with Jamie and put it all online. So, we've got over 100 members now, and it's growing.
Wow. Good work.
2 a day showing interest. And we've got a few from America and one from South Korea.
Wow.
So international as well. So it's very exciting. And I guess we'll just wait and see. But I reached my first goal long time ago, and the rest now is if I can help others do what I've done, then that's a real plus. And why in accounting? It's because accountants have such a huge position in the marketplace in terms of contribute, and they can run their business as well. And they've got such an influence on small businesses out there, and small businesses are the engine room of employment.
Absolutely, yeah.
They can help their clients run their businesses because the stuff we do in WISE, it can be used across all businesses. I mean, I often say that what we do may be different, what the industry is, the what we do is but businesses are run the same way. So how we do it is exactly the same. And if you don't change how you do it, but you change what you do, and often small businesses do that. They think it's greener on the other side, and they do without changing how they do it. If they did that, then they'll replicate what they created in the first business, in the second business, and then they'll look to change again. And that's what happened to me. I in the early days when I was working over 100 hours a week in accounting, and I wanted to get out, and I thought, I got into the wrong industry, and I read the book The E-Myth, and that changed my whole outlook on it. And then Napoleon Hill wrote a book called Think
and Grow Rich.
And he said that the gold is in your own backyard. Just look for it. And that was like a light came on for me. So that then I looked for how to do it, not what to do, and stayed in the business. And I just changed how I did it. And when I changed how I did it, my whole life changed. And here I am today, continuing to teach people how to do it.
And having fun and having time to turn a 10-minute coffee into a 4.5-hour lunch. And Chan, you are an inspiration as well as very generous with your time and your ideas. It's just like I get the feeling whenever I'm around you, you just want to, it's like, look how much fun I've had building this business. Now I just want to impart these ideas on to other people so you can have fun too. That's the feeling I get. It's just like you just want to impart this information and all of these tips on all business owners that you come across. So go on, give us a plug. How do we find Wise, Ed?
Okay, well, it's Wise Mentoring with a Z, not an S. And where you can, Google us, and you can find our website. And there's a 7-day trial, so it's free for 7 days. Just go in and have a look at it and trial it out. There's lots of videos. Most of it is a lot of it is the education, because if I can. There's a saying that the personality of your practice is a reflection of your personality, of the owner. And unless I can change the owner, you won't be able to change the business. And the way that you think will shape the kind of decisions you make, and the decisions you make will shape the actions that you take, and the actions that you take will shape your destination. And so therefore, if I can change the way you think, hopefully I can change your destination. And in there's a lot of educational material, and I often say that the best return on investment is the investment in yourself, because once you've learnt it, you can use it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so therefore, a lot of the 150 tools that are sitting in Wise Vault is educational based. So there's videos and spreadsheets and all sorts of things in there to run the accountancy practice. So go in there, give it a go. There's even a free book that I've written, an ebook. It's free. Go in there and download it for yourself and have a look at it. And there's no obligation. And if it's not for you, then the free trial runs out after 7 days and doesn't cost you a cent.
Brilliant. I absolutely love it. Well, very wise words from a wise man. Very appropriately entitled Wise Mentoring, but remember with a Z, not an S. Ed Chan, as always, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I've loved it. I hope you had fun. You always seem like you're having fun, though.
Most of it's because of you, Joanna.
Stop. Fabulous. Okay, well, look, I just want to say a massive thank you. And I think this has been a great episode. I'll be definitely going back and listening to it again.
Thanks for having me, Joanna.
Thank you,
thanks for making it so much fun.
Well, that's it for this two-part series all about joint ventures and how joint ventures are different to mergers and acquisitions. We've covered a lot in this two-part series, and whilst of course it's particularly relevant to anyone who is building an accounting practice, it's also extremely relevant, I think, to anyone who's building a business at all and who might be looking at ways to grow a business other than strictly through organic growth. If you'd like more information about this topic or you'd like to get in contact with Ed Chan, either at Chan Naylor or at Wise Mentoring, then all you need to do is head over to your show notes or over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com. There you'll be able to link through to Chan Naylor, and you'll also be able to link through to Wise Mentoring. And I know Ed has some fabulous Friday tips that he sends out from Wise Mentoring. You can easily set yourself up on that Wise Mentoring site. And I tell you what, the Friday tips are extremely insightful. So I highly recommend, no matter what business you're in, that you subscribe yourself to these Friday tips to get a bit of gold in your inbox every Friday morning. And of course, on our website, you'll also find details of how to contact our lawyers at Aspect Legal if you or your clients would like to discuss any legal aspects of sales or acquisitions. We've got a number of great services that help businesses both prepare for a sale or acquisition and help them to get transaction ready and to also guide them through the sale or acquisition process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. So don't hesitate to book a free appointment through our website if you'd like to find out how we might be able to assist. Well, that's it for today and for this two-part series. I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, why don't you go and leave us a review on your favourite podcast player, as well as, of course, hitting subscribe if you haven't already. Well, that's it. Thanks again for listening in. You've been listening to Joanna Oakey and the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.